Hello, and welcome back to May's Motel. Today we're doing my second minisode about Mark Chapman.
Ooh.
So think of your favorite band or artist, one that you're a diehard fan of. Don't make fun of me, but I am a diehard believer. I've been a fan of Justin Bieber since I was in 4th grade, and I still consider him to be my favorite artist.
That's true. She listens to him every time we get in the car.
He's my favorite. There's never a bad song, no skippers. In the 60s, many girls fangirled over the Beatles. They were the new up-and-coming rock band that everyone adored. We have lost many artists. Two that really impacted me were XXX and Juice WRLD. In 1980, the world lost John Lennon, a singer and musician of the Beatles. Although the band had been broken up at this point, this was a devastating loss felt by many across the globe.
Yeah, he was even working on his own solo music at the time.
This was a sad story for me to research.
Oh, you really?
Yeah.
I guess we'll get into why.
On May 10th, 1995, Mark David Chapman was born in Fort Worth, Texas. His father, David Chapman, was a staff sergeant in the U.S. Air Force, and his mother, Diane Chapman, was a nurse. He had a younger sister named Susan, who was born 7 years after him.
Wow. Okay.
According to Chapman, his father was physically abusive towards his mother and unloving towards him. As a child, he began to fantasize about having king-like power over a group of imaginary little people who lived in the walls of his bedroom. By the time he was 18, he had begun using drugs and skipping classes. He was often bullied at school because he was not a very good athlete.
That's rough, but at the same time, pretty sure the drugs didn't help.
Yeah, probably not. Chapman became a born-again Presbyterian in 1971. He met his first girlfriend, Jessica Blankenship, and began working at the South DeKalb County, Georgia YMCA as a camp counselor. Although he was not well-liked in school, he was very popular among the children at the YMCA camp. They called him Nemo, and he became the assistant director after winning an award for outstanding counselor. He was unanimously called an outstanding worker by those who knew him in the caretaking professions. After graduating from Columbia High School, Chapman moved to Chicago, and he played guitar in churches and Christian night spots. He worked for World Vision with Vietnamese refugees at a resettlement camp. He was named an area coordinator and a key aide to the program director, who later said that Chapman cared deeply for the children and he was a very hard worker. He accompanied the director to meetings with government officials, and he even shook President Gerald R. Ford's hand. And this is something that's always been crazy to me. He wasn't the first killer to meet a political leader.
Oh, yeah.
There's John Wayne Gacy, who met First Lady Rosalind Carter in 1978. I'll probably have a full episode on Gacy later, but it's fascinating to me how these terrible people can blend in and meet such important people in the government.
Mm-hmm.
Chapman later became a student at Covenant College in Lookout Mountain, Georgia. However, Chapman fell behind in his studies, and he began having suicidal thoughts after feeling like a failure.
Oh, no.
He dropped out of college after only one semester, and his girlfriend broke up with him soon after that. Chapman left his job at the resettlement camp, and he became a security guard. In 1977, Chapman moved to Hawaii, and he attempted suicide by carbon monoxide asphyxiation.
Oof.
He connected a hose to his car's exhaust pipe, but the hose melted and caused the suicide attempt to fail.
Oh, dang. So he survived. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Not for the
the
later
consequences,
events.
yeah.
He was then admitted to Castle Memorial Hospital for clinical depression. After his release, he began working at that hospital. At this time, his parents were going through a divorce, and his mother moved to live with him in Hawaii. It is believed that Chapman began planning to kill John 3 months before the assassination. Chapman was a longtime fan of the Beatles, but he turned against John Lennon when he made a highly publicized comment that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus.
Uh-oh.
Some members in Chapman's prayer group jokingly changed the lyrics of Lennon's song Imagine to say, imagine if John Lennon was dead.
Oh, no.
One of Chapman's childhood friends recalled that he had said that song was communist. Chapman was also angry that Lennon preached peace and love, yet he had millions of dollars. Chapman once stated that Lennon, quote, told us to imagine no possessions, and there he was, with millions of dollars and yachts and farms and country estates, laughing at people like me who had believed the lies and bought the records and built a big part of their lives around his music.
It sounds like he's pointing all his angers and failures in life
On him.
on person he had never even met. Yeah.
Chapman also said he listened to Lennon's solo albums a week prior to the murder and he would be angered by the lyrics. He said he did not like how Lennon talked about God in regards to the Beatles. In Chapman's mind, Lennon hated God and believed the Beatles were better than God himself. Chapman both supported and denied whether he felt justified to kill Lennon by his spiritual beliefs or if he had an intention of acquiring notoriety. During a brief psychotic episode prior to his sentencing, he said he was convinced that the meaning of his actions was to promote the book, The Catcher in the Rye. Chapman claimed to have an alternate list of targets that included Lennon's bandmate Paul McCartney, talk show host Johnny Carson, actress Elizabeth Taylor, actor George C. Scott, former First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy, U.S. President Ronald Reagan, and Hawaii Governor George Ariyoshi.
Yeah, so it just seems like
he just wants to kill anyone that's famous.
Yeah, so like his motives seem really ridiculous when he's blaming all this stuff on John Lennon. Now he's like, oh, I'll take anybody, actually.
Yeah, so he basically only chose Lennon because it was convenient at the time. In October of 1980, Chapman arrived in New York with plans to kill Lennon, but he left to get ammunition from a friend in Atlanta and returned to New York in November. While he was in New York on his first trip in October, Chapman was inspired to stop his plans because of the film Ordinary People. Ordinary People was a 1980 film about the disintegration of an upper-middle-class family after the accidental death of one of their two sons and the attempted suicide of the other. I think maybe Chapman related to this film in some way because he also had a failed suicide attempt, and the characters seemed to suffer from mental illness. When Chapman returned to Hawaii, he told his wife about his obsession to kill Lennon. He showed her his gun and bullets, but his wife did not alert the police or mental health services. Chapman did, however, make his own appointment to see a clinical psychologist, but he did not keep the appointment and flew back to New York on December 6, 1980. While he was there, he considered suicide once again, but this time he was thinking about jumping off of the Statue of Liberty.
Jeez.
On December 7th, Chapman aggressively approached singer James Taylor at the 72nd Street subway station. According to Taylor, Chapman pinned him to the wall and was talking about stuff he was going to do and how John Lennon was interested and he was going to get in touch with Lennon. That night, Chapman talked with his wife on the phone about getting help with his problems by working on his relationship with God. The next morning, Chapman left his hotel room, but he left behind his personal items for the police to find later. He bought a copy of The Catcher in the Rye and wrote, "This is my statement," on the inside. He then spent the day talking to fans and the doorman outside of Lennon's apartment building. At around 5 p.m., Lennon and Yoko Ono left their apartment to go to a recording session at Record Plant Studios. As they walked towards their limo, Chapman held out a copy of Lennon's album Double Fantasy for him to sign. Photographer Paul Goresh was standing by, and he actually captured a photo of Lennon signing the album, not knowing that he would be killed by Chapman only 6 hours later. In a later interview with Chapman, he said that he had asked another loitering Lennon fan to go out with him that night, but she said no. Chapman said that if she had accepted, he may not have killed Lennon that night, but he still would have tried another day.
Wow.
And also remember, he's married, and he's asking another girl to go out with him.
That's messed up, yeah.
At around 10:50 that night, Lennon and Yoko Ono returned to their apartment in the limo. They got out of the limo and passed Chapman as they were walking towards the entrance of the apartment building. From the street behind them, Chapman fired 5 bullets from a .38 special revolver. 4 of the bullets hit Lennon in the back and shoulder, puncturing his left lung and left subclavian artery. Chapman stayed at the scene, and he was reading from The Catcher in the Rye book that he had purchased earlier that day when police arrived and arrested him. The first responders saw that Lennon's wounds were very severe, and they did not have time to wait for an ambulance, so they rushed him to Roosevelt Hospital in a squad car. John Lennon was pronounced dead on arrival.
Oh, no.
3 hours later, Chapman told police, I'm sure the main part of me is Holden Caulfield, who is the main person in the book. The small part of me must be the devil." Chapman was charged with second-degree murder. He told police that he chose to use hollow point bullets to ensure Lennon would die. His wife, Gloria, had known about his plans to kill Lennon, but she took no action to report or stop him. Chapman said that he harbored resentment towards his wife because she did not tell anyone, especially the police, of his plans.
Wow, so, yeah, he's just blaming anyone he can. He's not taking responsibility for his decisions.
But at the same time, it's sad that he was so obvious with the struggles he had, and there was, like, even his wife was, like, not caring that much.
That's true.
Chapman was interviewed by more than a dozen psychologists and psychiatrists in the 6 months before his trial took place. They conducted a battery of standard diagnostic procedures and more than 200 hours of clinical interviews. 6 defense experts concluded that Chapman was psychotic. 5 of them diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia, while the 6th defense expert felt that he had manic depression. Court-appointed experts decided that he was delusional yet competent to stand trial. Chapman's first lawyer, Herbert Adlerberg, withdrew from the case after getting threats of lynching. Chapman's new lawyer, Jonathan Marks, instructed him to plead not guilty by reason of insanity at the initial hearing in January 1981. In June, Chapman told Marks he wanted to drop the insanity defense and plead guilty. Marks objected and legally challenged his competence to make that decision. In the hearing on June 22nd, Chapman said God had told him to plead guilty and that he would never change his plea or try to appeal regardless of his sentence. Marks told the court he opposed Chapman's change of plea, but Chapman refused to listen to him. Judge Dennis Edwards determined that Chapman had made his decision and declared him competent to plead guilty. The sentencing hearing took place on August 24th, 1981. Research psychiatrist Dorothy Lewis had maintained that Chapman's decision to change his plea did not appear reasonable or explicable, and she implied that the judge did not want to allow an independent competency assessment. The district attorney argued that Chapman committed this murder to easily rise to fame. When Chapman was asked if he had anything to say, he rose and he read a passage from The Catcher in the Rye. The passage he read aloud is as follows. I keep picturing all these little kids playing some game in this big field of rye and all. Thousands of little kids, and nobody's around. Nobody big, I mean, except me. And I'm standing on the edge of some crazy cliff. What I have to do, I have to catch everybody if they start to go over the cliff. I mean, if they're running and they don't look where they're going, I have to come out from somewhere and catch them. That's all I do all day. I'll just be the catcher in the rye and all. Chapman was sentenced to 20 years to life, and the judge ordered psychiatric treatment for him during his incarceration. He was imprisoned at Attica Correctional Facility outside of Buffalo, New York. In February of 1982, he began fasting, which lasted for 26 days. So the New York Supreme Court authorized the state to force feed him. He was confined to a special handling unit for violent and at-risk prisoners, because there was a fear that Lenin fans and the general population would cause harm to him. Chapman worked in the prison as a legal clerk and a kitchen helper. He was also in the family reunion program, which allows one conjugal visit a year with his wife. He also gets occasional visits from his sister and friends. On May 15th, he was transferred to the Wend Correctional Facility in Alden, New York. Chapman became eligible for parole for the first time in 2000, after serving 20 years in prison.
Oh, wow.
He is required to have a parole hearing every 2 years from that year and beyond under New York state law. Since then, Chapman has been denied parole 11 times. Before Chapman's first parole hearing, Yoko Ono sent a letter to the board requesting that Chapman stay behind bars for the rest of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Chapman's 12th parole hearing is scheduled for August of 2022.
Oh, so he's still trying to get out. Wow.
Well, I don't think he's trying to get out. Just by law, they have to give him the parole hearings, but he doesn't actually want to get out because he said in the beginning
he wants to stay.
he's guilty and God told him that that's his verdict.
Okay.
The assassination of John Lennon impacted the world forever. After his death, a massive crowd gathered around his apartment building with a nonstop musical tribute playing through their portable radios. Mayor Ed Koch said Lennon was an international figure that made New York City his home, and that was a point of pride for the city. On the Sunday of the week of his death, radio stations held a 10-minute silence for Lennon, which was then followed by his song Love. There is a memorial for John Lennon in Strawberry Fields, a section of Central Park across the street from his apartment building that Yoko Ono had landscaped in his honor. This was an emotional story for me to cover. I was constantly reminded of the feelings I had when we lost X, Juice WRLD, Mac Miller, and Lil Peep, and so many more talented artists. It angers me that people are okay with taking a life for such selfish reasons. Mark Chapman simply wanted fame, and he did that by taking away the life of a talented and well-loved musician, and that left the entire world hurting from the loss. Although they are celebrities and we don't know them personally, it still hurts to know that we lost someone that was so special. They impact our lives in so many ways that it still feels like we're losing someone close to us. I can't imagine the pain Yoko Ono went through. I'm sure it was terrible to see her husband shot multiple times right beside her. I encourage you all to continue listening to John Lennon's music. Don't let Mark Chapman turn the fame towards him and away from John Lennon. John Lennon and all of the other influential artists we have lost over the years will continue to live on through us as long as we continue to listen to their music and share it with others. So thank you for checking in to this week's Minisode, and I hope you'll visit again next week.
Bye.